Sing it with me, oh people, don't give up. I know things are tough, I know that going can't run from Tyler. Oh people, don't give up, cause victory will be yours one day. Elders, oh, I'm talking to the people of El Salvador. I know you're living so.
Thank you, early birds, for coming to the conference. My name is Sue Englander. I'm the convener of the Howard Grayson LGBT Elder Life Conference. And we convene this conference every year. This is our second time at the Cadillac Hotel. I love the Cadillac because it was the heart of the old LGBT community. And it also reaches out to those of our brothers and sisters who live here in the Tenderloin and would like to participate in stuff like this. So we thank you very much for coming. Let me tell you a little bit about Howard Grayson first. Howard's picture is on the back of the program. He was a very, very dear friend of mine. Howard and I, along with 4 other people, took care of one of our movement's heroes, Howard Wallace, who was active in LGBT politics since 1967. He died in 2012, and for the last 2 years of his life, we took care of him. He was very, very dear to us, and he deserved every minute of care that we were able to give him. Howard was one of his caregivers, and as a matter of fact, he would get our friend Howard Wallace up in the morning, get him showered, get him dressed, give him breakfast, and get him ready for the day. Howard Grayson and Howard Wallace would take walks all over the city. The one thing that Howard Wallace was famous for is that he never stopped walking until 3 days before he died. And he and Howard Grayson would walk around the entire city. And Howard Grayson was a very gentle and patient caregiver, and we loved him for that. One day, Howard disappeared. Howard Grayson. And at first, we were actually supposed to meet one evening, and Howard didn't show up, and we were all kind of annoyed. And we said, Howard, my goodness, why would you be late? Because this is a really important meeting. And then the next day, nobody knew where Howard was. We called his apartment building, and they said he'd been taken away the night before in an ambulance to Kaiser Hospital. But when we called Kaiser Hospital, they did not know where he was. All they would tell us, since we were not his power of attorney, was that Howard had been discharged. There was literally a citywide search, which involved Aaron Peskin, who is now a member of the Board of Supervisors. Aaron really helped us by publicizing Howard's disappearance in the newspaper. And eventually we found out that Howard had died at Kaiser, and they did not know who to notify, so his body had lain in the morgue for 6 days. And I thought to myself, this should never happen to anyone, which is why we started this conference. Howard Grayson was a Black Panther. He was an LGBT activist, and he was a prominent member of the Harvey Milk Democratic Club. He assisted elders in using technology. Excuse me, I've got a little frog in my throat. He assisted at Canon Kip. He helped elders use technology. And he was a licensed and union worker caregiver. So we miss him very much. And we also felt that his life example of a real fighter in the struggle was something that we wanted to memorialize. And so this is why we have this conference. The conference logo, right here, captures the spirit of the priorities that Howard loved most: unions, Black power, LGBT liberation, and basically being a gentle and kind caregiver. So I'd like to welcome you to to being friends of Howard this morning. And first of all, I would like to thank the volunteers who helped make this conference possible. Catherine, who is going to chair one of the panels today, and Jasmine G., who is your mistress of raffles. And she also has put, both Catherine and Jasmine have put lots of sweat and blood into the planning of this conference. I would also especially like to thank our sponsors without whom this would not be possible. First of all, San Francisco Pride is our fiscal agent, and they very kindly assist us with managing our fiscal affairs and giving us 501c3 nonprofit status. And their president is here today, so please give SF Pride a hand. We also want to thank the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, who gave us a very large grant this year, and we are so appreciative. One of our other sponsors is Senior and Disability Action, and they are represented at the table in the corner by Elise and Pi. Give them a good welcome. Open House could not be with us today, but they are one of our sponsors, as is the Harvey Milk LGBT Democratic Club, Harvey's Bar in the Castro Coffee, Hot Cookie, and there are plenty of hot cookies from Hot Cookie. Yeah. Rainbow Grocery, and Joey Kane is a representative of Rainbow. The California Association of Voting Officials, and Brent Turner, who is their representative and was a good friend of Howard, could not be here today because this weekend is the California Democratic Club convention. And finally, we'd like to thank Felicia Elizondo and Andre Kingsley for helping to sponsor this event. Okay, at this point, Lito Sandoval was supposed to help us with a memorial. This year's conference is in honor of about the 50 people who died or were injured at the Pulse nightclub last year on June 12th. Mm-hmm. This catastrophe in Orlando, Florida, what may have been the first time that people became sympathetic and their hearts went out to LGBT people of color. And so, what a shame it is that it's an event like this that we have to wait for to have this kind of empathy. Hello. So, without any further ado, again, we'll have Lito speak later. But why don't we start our first panel? But before I do, Jasmine is selling raffle tickets in the corner. We have a number of really wonderful raffle prizes, including dinners at several lovely restaurants, a membership to the Tenderloin Museum next door, and lots of other lovely things. So please consider buying a raffle ticket or two. Okay? So I am going to introduce, let me just make sure I get your whole name, Catherine. I'm going to introduce Catherine Hans von Rotes-Zittler. And she is, again, one of our great planning committee members. And she is going to moderate the first panel on 70s liberation, lessons learned for our time. So thank you, Catherine.
Welcome to this year's Howard Grayson's conference. And we now open up a panel discussion on 70s liberation and lessons we've learned. First of all, on the panel today, I have the honor of having a former Board of Supervisors President and former Board of Supervisor Harry Britt. Harry Britt was a both a political activist in the 60s and civil rights activist in the 60s.
I was too young in the 60s.
Okay. but he was also once a Methodist minister. Quite a good combination there. Later on, he went on to become one of original founding members of the San Francisco Gay Democratic Club, which was later renamed the Harvey Milk Club after the tragic death of Supervisor Harvey Milk. And first, he was appointed by Mayor Dianne Feinstein, and later one of the first highly elected officials in California, and was one of the key authors of the domestic partnership, which was first vetoed by Mayor Dianne Feinstein at the time, but it was later came down and passed in the next year. And he's been a stalwart in this fight for over the years, and once again, gentleman supervisor, Harry is great. My next panelist is Joey Kane. He's also a community activist and an independent historian, specialized in gay men's history, and was once a curator at the San Francisco Public Library exhibition on the My Days and Dreams, the World of Edward Carpenter. Later, he was also involved with the 1960s Gay Liberation Front in the downtown Buffalo, New York, at the time in the 1970s, and later participated in the San Francisco Night Riots. Later on, still satisfied with his accomplishments, he was one of the original members of the Nomi Nos, the first federally recognized 501c3 church to articulate gay men's traditions of spirituality. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome our panelists to this discussion. First, I want to start with you first. Why does people have such this great fascination about the 1970s and the liberation of the 1970s? What was so special about it?
I think it was partly because people of my generation, everything up until then was so awful. There was World War II, and that was, we won and rah. But then after that, there wasn't a lot for young lesbians and gay boys to feel good about. I was a Methodist preacher. Shows how screwed up I was. But there were people worse off than me. There's some who still are Methodist preachers. So it was really coming to San Francisco and discovering this other reality, this non-homophobic possibility in life, this sense that I could be proud of exactly who I am, not what my mom and daddy wanted me to be. That was extraordinary. And I think for so many of us, and this young fellow is a prime example, that sense of possibility in your own life, in your own terms, connected with particularly the African American civil rights movement, hope, it just brought about hope. It created possibility. It made life worth it.
I think you can't talk about the 70s without talking about the 1960s, and especially when you talk about San Francisco. But both in terms of freeing the possibility of what people could be, it really sort of starts in post-World War II. And certainly with the Beats, there's this ongoing sort of historic development of people seeking authenticity, of being really who they are, not who society has told them they should be or who their parents have told them they should be. You start to get that with the Beats throughout the 60s, and one of the things you didn't mention, I've curated an exhibit at the Gay and Lesbian Historical Society called Lavender Tinted Glasses, a groovy gay look at the Summer of Love 1967. And I feature four openly queer people who were significant figures in that. And one of the themes that keeps on coming through was this search for authenticity, to strip away the bullshit that had people at a crew thinking this is who I'm supposed to be. By the time the 60s are over, there has been this push for authenticity, but it was actually fairly sexist and pretty homophobic. So coming out of the late 60s and the Summer of Love and everything that went on there, you start to have a second wave of feminism, of the women's movement, and you start to have a third wave, really, in a way, of gay liberation. If the first wave was folks back in the late 1800s, the second wave was Harry Hay and the founding of the Mattachine Society in the 1950s. After Stonewall, you start to have this third wave where people were much more self-directed. They weren't so worried about getting straight people to like them. They said, I don't care whether or not you like me, this is who I am. And that is, again, part of that movement towards authenticity. The 70s fascinates. I mean, I thought the 70s were horrible. I hated them, you know? It was, you know, yeah, it seemed horrible. The 60s was the time I romanticized, both the 1960s and the 1860s. But the
1760s was.
they were bad either. So, I mean, in the 70s, in some ways, it seemed like it became depoliticized. In the 60s, it seemed many of us believed the revolution was right around the corner. We were, of course, very deluded. But it really felt like, you know, it was, and not just sexual revolution, actual economic revolution. One thing that didn't come out in your introduction, Harry and I believe, well, we're both socialists. I believe you're still socialists. And we come from a sort of economic understanding of oppression and transformation of society. And that was really sort of what was happening in the radical movement in the late 60s. The 70s was almost a retreat from that. But it was this tremendous opening of personal freedom, sexually, even gender identity-wise, you know, what you could do with your life. It really opened up. So I think that's where, especially for a lot of queer people, the 70s holds a lot of fascination. But I thought, you know, it was the clone. I hated the clone. It seemed to be, you know, gay men embracing this very masculinist, macho conception. And it seemed like a retreat from what had been happening in the early 70s.
But also, a lot of people would also say that one thing that was happening in society was also a rebellion against the hypocrisy in society. You would have, for example, like the Vietnam War. You had, you know, rich people, kids would avoid going to Vietnam, where the poor people and the innocent kids were getting shipped out to Vietnam. And that kind of helped fuel the yearning for something more. Harry, how do you see that play?
I think that was in the air. It was everything. Of course, the other thing that was in the air that was more important to my own development was the African American civil rights movement, and I was from the South, and I was not raised to believe that African Americans were going to change everything. Their job was just to figure out a way to survive, as it was for queers in this sort of different kind of way. And so, you know, to have lived at a time when Martin Luther King was, you know, on my deathbed, I remember hearing Martin Luther King in Montgomery and in Chicago and in San Francisco, the extraordinary role of the window of possibility that not just he, but that whole movement and its inspiration for the women's movement and other movements. It turned me from someone who was remembering the past and romanticizing it to someone who was saying, the past was nothing. Now is the time. Now we can take over the fucking world. Excuse me. Now is our day, and the African Americans are our leaders. And it's really great. And it has been kind of great. Not compared to expectations, but compared to reality. It's been kind of great since 1970.
Well, I would echo that. I mean, as a young kid, Martin Luther King was my great hero. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, which was a very racist city. It was in the north, it wasn't in the south. But the north was, I mean, I grew up with parents who would say, oh, those colored people moved into my neighborhood and destroyed it. And I mean, they also referred to the university as Jewry because it was the farthest the kids from New York City could get away from their parents and still be in the state university system. So I grew up in a fairly racist, anti-Semitic, male youth. I mean, there were a number of factors going on. You have the civil rights movement has been happening, although, there was, between the assassinations that went down and then Nixon. I mean, you can't talk about can't talk about the 70s without Nixon because, in a way, we got rid of him, but in a way, many of the probably most promising, brightest people on the left really turned away from looking at government in any of its forms as an avenue for social transformation. There's a real cynicism that came out from that period, which I think has influenced us in the long run. We have a few really good people who did get into government, but a lot of the good people stayed away.
And another thing that people also find quite really interesting was there was a degree of pushback from certain elements inside that the FBI and the police organizations. Can you shed any light on that?
You want to? No, you go ahead. I mean, honestly, historically, there's always pushback. I don't know if there was any greater pushback in the 1970s than there certainly was in 1917. With the Red Scare that went on then, and rounding people up and deporting them. There, in some ways, because of Nixon actually being forced from office, it did seem like maybe the institutions were sort of working because they did get rid of them. I always think of the 70s in terms of more of the pushback being the rise of Anita Bryant and the development of an explicit organized homophobia that had not really been there previously. Homophobia had just sort of been cultural, there were churches and stuff, but by the mid-70s, 76, you have national movements, fundamentalist Christian movements that have glommed onto homosexuality as the way they're going to build their base, and it becomes a highly organized homophobia.
I don't want to dwell on the 70s, but to me, I was in Chicago in the 70s, mostly on the South Side as a pastor. And Martin Luther King was 3-4 blocks away. And to me, the definitive experience of the United States of America, the 20th century, was the African American civil rights movement of that period of time. Because there was nothing lower than a black man in the society, especially in the South, Georgia and Texas, where I was raised. They were not considered to be people at all. And to have Martin Luther King stand up, and not just him, but so many other union leaders and neighborhood leaders, and even preachers, of course, King's a preacher too, to stand up and offer a whole new definition of race. It wasn't that we should start treating black people better. It was like when you think race, don't think white on top and black on the bottom. Think of a new discovery of humanness based upon the experience of non-white people. And that was extraordinary. And I can't imagine Harvey Milk without all that. Because what we have tried to do, in a humble way, was say that about queers. that you don't start, you give up the business of let's try to be like the good straight people, and you start saying, let's create a reality of living in the world, powerful and being happy, that is rooted in the radical alienation that we felt as homosexual men and women all those years, just as African Americans have felt so much worse experiences for centuries. I can't see us without that set of experiences leading up to us. It never was going to be that things just got better a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Things had to get really bad, and then great human beings stood out and created possibilities for us, and we were the lucky ones to get into that.
And speaking of leaders, political leaders, it was right about that time also there was all these major assassinations. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy, and etc. Did that definitely? What impact did that have on the first liberation? Did it crush it, or did it basically cause it to go in hibernation? When you think that, I don't know, you go for it.
I don't know. I mean, people like Martin Luther King were used to assassinations and lived in expectations of being assassinated. And Harvey Milk specifically lived in expectation of being assassinated because it defies the basic rules of American life for queers and black people and people like to stand up and say we're going to sort of run things from now on. It just doesn't work that way, things melt in water. We were supposed to melt in homophobia and that black people in racism, and so I don't think it was. You don't anticipate a Martin Luther King, but I think it makes sense when it happens.
In a way, one thing people kind of forget about, again, let's drop the 70s, 60s thing because this is a continuum of history. You were talking about the backlash. There was an organized plan of assassination and disinformation carried out by the FBI against the Black Panther Party in the United States, and they literally went in with machine guns blasting the households full of people in Chicago. They killed scores of African American people, and it was organized by the FBI. And I think that is a significant thing to look at in terms of, when people say, "Oh my God, Donald Trump is president; it could never get worse." I'm like, well, it's been pretty bad before. And I really recommend it if people haven't seen it. There's a great documentary about the Black Panthers that's out that I highly recommend because it really gives you a good understanding of how far the government has gone in the past to literally shoot people to death, like suppress stuff. There's kind of a mythology that the assassination of all these leaders led to a sort of demoralization, and that it didn't help. It certainly didn't help. But you've got to look at whatever's been achieved. It's never enough. No matter what we achieve, and people are. There's always going. I am shocked. We think gay people are doing so well now. They're about to take away a woman's right to control her own body. It's inconceivable to me, and it again drives home this point that if we're not constantly vigilant and organizing, we will lose everything. Whether it's African American or I'm expecting these people to start arguing. Well, the Bible says it's okay to own other human beings, which is what they did back in the 1840s and 50s. I have no doubt that they might try to get rid of the abolition of slavery. I think there's no limit to what these people can do if we don't fight back.
And that's a very good point because I want to briefly trying to interject this whole issue of Trump. How do you explain Trump in 2017? It's supposed to be the 21st century, the age of great enlightenment, but we seem to be jumping backwards.
I start. He's the Trump expert.
I think people have to stop being so shocked by Trump and look at why he was elected by the dispossessed white working class. There are people who are really hurting in this country, and I'm sorry, fucking the Democrats have been part of the reason they're hurting. Neoliberal ideology has shipped jobs overseas, it's concentrated wealth in cities, and there's a dispossessed. I mean, I know this is where I'm from. I've seen it, and people are like, "Oh, how could Trump get elected?" It's because the liberal media, I will use that term, fucking only gazed at its own navel and didn't look outside of these urban centers. And these folks have been fucked over by the Democrats, they've been fucked over by the Republicans, and they know Donald Trump is not a Republican. They really see him as someone who's going to come in and disrupt this whole given situation that has only fucked them over, and they're so desperate, they're willing to go blindly into the dark because things are so bad for them. I also don't dismiss the fact that, racism is definitely an element, misogyny was an element, but I think economics has always been looked at as what's motivating. Hitler came to power because of one of the worst oppressions in the history of Western Europe. Trump has come to power because there are massive numbers of people who are really economically dispossessed. We almost don't see it here in San Francisco. As much as we fight for economic justice here in San Francisco, as much as we push for it, it still kind of remains blind to us what these folks are going through in the middle of Ohio or many of these places. So I don't think Trump is a surprise.
I see Trump as more of a symptom
Yes.
than a cause.
Yeah.
But during the Depression, America became very reality and very aware of how hard life is for people like you. They're poor, they're hungry, they're angry, things aren't working for them. And that was a time of great potential and great excitement and things were happening in Europe and all that. Something went wrong somewhere. I don't know, don't want to blame Roosevelt, but somehow we lost an opportunity, I think, to create a socialist reality, build a power organized around cooperation and human needs, rather than who's got the biggest baseball bat. And that was a terribly lost opportunity. And then, of course, the World War II turned all attention to it. Let's beat up on the Japanese. And I don't think we've ever caught up again with the vision of the radical Depression era prophets of hope about the future.
And those are very good points, because personally I've been through the parts of America, like the Appalachians, and they're mostly white people, wealthy people, who are going through really good tough time. Nobody talk about it. And if something else came along and said, hey, that means I have a vision. But what do Rhoda think that Clinton, had the media behind her, yet she basically was like a poor candidate? I mean, do you think that the Democrats in many ways are shooting themselves in the foot by putting Clinton up front?
I mean, I'll say that out there. I think Barack Obama was a bad candidate. The Democrats only run bad candidates because they are so aligned with the neoliberal agenda of the ruling masters, of the profit-driven people. They temper it with some bandages to offset some of the horrible things that happen with this concentration of money and wealth through her hands. But I actually think Hillary might have been a better candidate than Barack, but that's only because I think she was much more experienced than he was.
Which can be bad.
which can be a bad or I mean, you know, you're right. It could go either way. You know, I mean, it is weird that suddenly Bernie Sanders is a major candidate. And that probably was one of the most hopeful things that came out of this last election cycle, was that someone who was an avowed socialist actually was out there being considered a serious candidate. And what I hope is, that, you know, but of course, Hillary and that part of the party freaked out. And again, I don't blame her. I still believe a lot of it does come from misogyny, and that there was, you know, huge gender issues about the attacks on her and the inequality. But I'm hoping, again, that the left wing of the Democratic Party actually figures out how to build bridges to the white dispossessed working class and continues to build bridges to African American and Latino dispossessed communities. Because if those three communities get together, they will win. But as always, historically, the way power keeps power is by dividing them, keeping them divided, because they know if they get together, there's some.
The Roosevelt period, post-World War II, World War II, post-World II, when I was a little boy, was a period of hope. But I think we failed. We failed to build a power base for the kind of progressive vision that was so live in the Democratic Party in those days. We didn't create structures. We relied too much on the magnetism of people. And that was an important failure, I think, by us, not our parents, not by the bad guys. And I think that's still can happen. I think our hope for the future is not that we get a president that's more liberal than whoever, but that somehow those of us who know how to play politics devote our energies to creating alternatives that's stable to not just white people, but people, in a way that disempowers the Trumps. There shouldn't be room in the political system for Trump. He's an oddity, he's a freak. He should be another one of those failed third-party candidates that comes along every 4 years. But he's not, because a Democratic alternative just is not, and I don't think Hillary would make it any better, is not engaging people with hope and a sense of possibility.
Well, okay. Now, let's not bring it close back now to San Francisco. I mean, what was really happening in San Francisco back then, especially like the radical affairs and some of the things that were happening in the 1970s, early 80s. You want to know about that?
I'm not too young to remember.
I've read about it in books. You know, I mean, the 70s here in San Francisco was a pitched battle. You have Dianne Feinstein and everything she represented, which was downtown business interests, business as usual, versus what was seen as a sort of decentralized neighborhood power base. You know, everything that we got, rent control, domestic partners, any kind of gay rights stuff, it was a tooth and nail battle. It didn't sell through. And Harry, you know, was very involved in much of the progressive legislation we were able to achieve here during that period. But it was not easy. You know, oh my God, rent control, votes. That was a long battle. I do want to reiterate what Harry said. The right wing made a really good decision back in the 70s to align themselves with fundamentalist Christian churches. The churches are literally people's communities. You have this mechanism that's there where people see each other every Sunday. They live their lives with each other. We need to develop that in the progressive and left movement. where it's not just we go to one meeting a week or something, but where it's communities that are interconnected and living together. Until we develop a counter-organization to the fundamental solutions, it's going to be really hard.
But they're not a problem in San Francisco.
No, you're right. No, I was thinking nationally. I digress. Yeah, no, San
But in San
Francisco.
Francisco, we have the big business interests, and we have the corporate immigrants that kind of also gone a long way in maybe reform. Harry, you want to add anything about that?
I don't know. When I was on the board of supervisors, they were the enemy. My rhetoric was about the evils of downtown. But in reality, downtown didn't seem to give that much of a damn about what was going on in Haight-Ashbury or our mission. I think we have to take responsibility for our own failures and not blame it on the Republicans or the Chamber of Commerce. San Francisco, and we did accomplish some things. San Francisco can produce the Harvey Mill or some of the other lefties that have made it power in the city. Because there's really not, the Democratic Party is mirrors now. There's no leadership there. John Burton was a strong, powerful leader. He's gone now. What have we got left? Art Agnes was was not much of a leader. And there's a vacuum. There's a vacuum right now, which I don't want to fill, thank you. There's a vacuum right now of openings for young people or people outside of the system who want to make some real change. For me, it was usually rent control issues and other economic issues around housing. Maybe that's not what today should be all about. But I really think that San Francisco in 2017 or whatever it is ripe for intelligent, focused, realistic, progressive people to articulate an agenda that is responsive to the people in the Sunset and the Richmond, and not just this part of town and my part of town. Because it really is. I worked with Richard Daley was mayor of Chicago. I've seen power. We ain't got no Richard Daley's here. Diane Feinstein is not a Richard Daley.
Really?
No.
And definitely not.
Willie's my guy. Willie and I are from the same county in Texas. We know how to do it. No, Willie's not interested. Willie's not going to prevent some grassroots thing from happening. Willie's not a bad guy, actually.
But we also had those with the white knight riots and rather than shutting down the gay bars. How did that really develop? Do you want to say that?
Well, the White Knight Riot was a direct result to Dan White getting what many perceived as a slap on the wrist for assassinating the mayor and the gay supervisor. People were justly angry, and they marched on City Hall, and they started to throw things, and it escalated. And it was actually, because when Harry was appointed after Harvey's assassination, there were many people in the community who didn't like Harry. He's going to bow down and die Feinstein. And I remember I was, involved in the anarchist community, but I was following him. It's like, Harry did one of the bravest things I ever saw the night of the White Knight Riot. On TV, they were trying to get him to condemn people who were rioting. And he said, I'm not going to condemn them. They are, they justified anger. And he's like, oh my God, a politician who's not saying, it's bad to break the windows at City Hall. That moment still brings him up. It was a really brave thing to do, and so, you know, I mean, and again, you had people who were angry. It wasn't also just about the assassination. There were a lot of people involved in that riot, both in and on the street. It was about the class war that was going on at that time, the issues that were happening at that time.
He's talking about 1979, 78, 79. The 70s, which was when Harvey Milk was doing his thing, and I was kind of getting my feet wet in politics. The leadership, the liberal leadership of the city, particularly in the queer world, were gradualists. They were arguing that, you know, we've got, don't worry about the blacks because we got some black preachers who will take care of that. Don't worry about the gays, this is Alice B. Toklas. And there was a kind of a gradualism. Things are going to get better and better and better. Harvey Milk was the antithesis of that point of view. Harvey Milk was, we better do something right now or we're all going to be killed. That all of these liberal facades of progress were really ways that people had of staying in power without doing anything. And that's been a fight within the queer political world ever since. That's really what Harvey Milk and LGBT came about, as well as some other organizations, is just asserting that gradualism serves the man. It doesn't serve the future. It's a holding on. And when Harvey Milk comes along, he's saying, quit what you're doing. I don't care if what you're doing is advantages for the Red Cross or whatever, which needs to be done. But what we've got to do now is challenge power and point out the self-serving nature of the liberals who are in power and replace them with people, conservative, liberal, right-wing, left-wing, who are going to stand up and address the problems that you're facing right now, that are facing people who don't have other places to go in the political world. Harvey was a very angry man, and the bullshit that bothered him the most was the gradualism. He felt like Alice B. Toklas was not a very good organization because they were just too kind of the system. It took me a while to learn that. And I think from whatever your movement is, whatever your Tenderloin neighborhood empowerment, whatever project, whatever it is, you don't. Gradualism simply does not work. You need drama. You need exposure of fraud of the people who are in power. You need to engage people who think politics is a bunch of shit because they're right. And a lot of that happened with Harvey Milk and other leaders, not just the African American leaders and some really courageous people in Chinatown. It can happen. And I hope it's happening now. But Feinstein is not the answer.
Not in my book.
Just not an answer for what? There's a question.
It's interesting the thing between gradualism or immediatism. I don't know if that would be it. It didn't start in the 70s. That goes back to the foundation of the Mattachine Society of the contemporary gay movement. Was do we do it slowly? Well, yes, that's right. Back to Moses. Was he gay?
She was in the closet.
And again, as an anarchist, I look a little askance at government, but I participate in elections and these programs.
We appreciate it.
I'm always drawn. When I first saw the name Radical Theory, I said, "That's an awesome name."
Yeah.
How did you come up with it?
So I didn't come up with it. So the Radical Fairies were, again, came out of this period of the 70s in a way. And this is where a number of people who were radical felt that the gay movement was becoming too assimilationist and too accommodating, too self-satisfied, wasn't pushing, wasn't checking privilege and power and things like that. And a group of people, including Harry Hay and John Burnside and Don Hill Hefner in LA, who founded the Gay Community Center down there, and some other people, called for a gathering in 1979 and used the term radical fairy. Harry Hay actually came up with that term. And they thought they would get about 20 or 30 people, and 200 people showed up. And some people call it a movement. I tend to call it a tendency. It didn't quite have the organization of a movement, but it became, for a while, I think, a place where a lot of queer men who valued their sexuality as an important part of their life, and politics and spirituality were able to find a place and meet with other people who brought all of these three things together. Certainly it really was about gay men discovering our history, discovering who we are, and discovering why we're here and what we're here to do. One of the, it really did, here in San Francisco, was probably one of its most organized areas. We started a 501c3 religious organization. Again, known as, it was the first time an explicitly gay group got the federal government to recognize us as a 501c3. They didn't do it the first time. And we went to the ACLU and they say, okay, answer their questions. If they don't do it, we'll take the case and push it. But here we were going to demonstrations. We were having weekly spiritual groups, heart circles we called them. We started to volunteer over Martin Corey's one day a week, helping to feed people. It was attempting to really build this larger sense of community. Raised money, bought a sanctuary up in Oregon, which became a nightmare. We were young, and then suddenly, the AIDS epidemic hits, and half the really great leaders. We lost incalculable numbers of gay leaders in the AIDS epidemic. We really did. It was, the great thing about the radical fairies, at least in the 80s, during the 80s period, was it did have a specifically political element to it, and a political articulation, as well as spiritual, cultural.
And you're speaking of all the people that died during the AIDS epidemic. There was one big one was the absolute disgraceful performance by Minnesota leaders, sitting around doing nothing.
Nationally, yes. Locally, actually, many of the local political people fairly early on got good on the AIDS stuff.
Diane, we had our problems, but when it came to the HIV epidemic, she really wanted to help. Yeah, and it was not, if you could come up with a plan that made some kind of economic sense, she wasn't being an obstacle. And that was extraordinary, because there were so many queer organizations that were doing great work, but it would have been horrible if they had a city hall power structure that wasn't supported. And she really was. And whatever problems we had with her, she never said no to me. And I don't think she said no to even groups like the Radical Fairies that she didn't approve of. She was really receptive to her.
Well, she did radically try to shut down the bathhouses.
Well,
and there, of course, there was still, back and forth on whether or not health-wise.
She and I had a few conversations.
Did you ever take her to a bathhouse?
And one thing that at first she weak at the domestic partnership bill. What was her logic on that?
Well, part of it may have been because she didn't trust me. But Diane didn't want to be a pioneer. She wanted to be a good, loving, supportive friend of the poor and needy. But she didn't want to be an innovator. She was so worried that she might do something that would make her the laughing stock of the Reader's Digest or something. And we had long talks about that, and ultimately she really behaved okay. But there was fear. It's scary, and I think it's more scary for women. It's scary to be the mayor and to have the power to fuck everything up. It would have been scary for me. I didn't want to be mayor, but that would have been scary for me. But push came to shove, she was responsive to the human realities that are going on in the epidemic. And I have had many quarrels with her, and I criticize her for my dying day, but not about her response to HIV.
Well, now here comes the big question. What were some of the lessons we learned from all those past, 10 to 6 years, and how can we apply it to today?
We had our turn. Ask some of these young
Right.
Well, let's hear from the sages first, then we'll go to the open mic.
Well, what Harvey Mills would have wanted us to learn was don't rely upon the kindness of strangers. Don't rely upon liberal politicians or church leaders or any of the good people to take care of you. Build power. Build on anger. Awaken a sense of urgency in the community. And if you do that, then young people are going to come out of the closet, come out of the woods, and want to be part of it. If you just do niceness, you're going to get boring people. You're not going to accomplish a damn thing. So, I don't know, that sounds maybe trite, but the main thing is to give up that. When Harvey was first elected, people all over the country were saying, wow, we've got a homosexual person on the board of supervisors. That's wonderful. But it's not wonderful unless behind that there's power to affect change and to hold and accountability. And this is Harvey's case, he did an excellent job at it, but too short.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed between then and now is that young people were way more pushy and way more, I'm going to do this. I think that there's been a squashing down of younger people, or a little more timid now. I remember doing stuff in the 60s and the 70s when I was 15 or 16 that I can't imagine folks now doing in terms of just going out and striking out and doing that. I do think there needs to be some level of arrogance on the part of young people in pushing this. That I totally, even if they're attacking me, I still like to see that. But it really is then building the structures to sustain that as an ongoing thing, and not as like this week's whatever movement of the week or issue of the week, to forge that, develop that into something that's going to be around for 30 years or more. Because, the flavor of the week, the movement of the week only lasts that week, but the real underlying changes take a long time, even if you're not a graduate. It's, you make spurts forward and then you've got to maintain that, but it changes a long historic process that you need to have the community of cooperation.
But it's still more fun to be the guy changing stuff
Than the
than
one.
the guy who's trying to hold on to the old crap.
Yes. I actually now, of course, everybody says this when they get older, I have an appreciation for more of the old crap than I did when I was trying to get rid of it. It's like, some of the ideas we had were really bad. And actually what was there was probably a little bit better, but whatever. It comes back to, I was part of the generation that had this major generation gap between me and my parents and everybody else in my generation. and their parents. But I realized, fuck, my parents' generation put in Roosevelt. They brought in Social Security. They did all of this shit.
Well, the Depression helped.
So of course the Depression helped. But I don't know if that would happen now. But you're right. But it could have gone the other way.
That's true.
They elected Kennedy. Wasn't whatever. Well, they even elected Johnson. Oh yeah,
You're running out of points.
Johnson did great stuff. Yeah, there was the Vietnam War, but I think if you look at Johnson, he was probably one of the most progressive in terms of achieving actual real socialist policies and programs. One of the most successful presidents. Vietnam was big.
Nothing good can ever come out of Texas.
You mentioned,
But it's always big.
you mentioned the issue that young people nowadays wouldn't be so pushy. Is that because of the education system that we have now, of the dumbing down of the youth?
I think it's because of this. The device thing.
Yeah, so
I mean, that is the one thing I will say. This whole, and it's been a major radical transformation from the idea of what is a friend. A friend used to be someone you sat in the same room with, talking with. Now, it's a button you push on a device. People don't sit in the same room together. And I think that has radically changed people's brain functions. When you never get anything done unless you get people to sit in a room together, or a whole group of you go out and decide to break windows, or you do something. The history of the world really is a history of gangs, in a way, and gangs are the primal unit of how humans get things done, whether politics or art movements or drug dealing. And you got to sit in the room with each other. I don't believe doing this, and I think that mutes people's response. They think they can text something, and they've changed the world. And going out and screaming it in the street, you're getting a little closer to changing the world.
Well, I think one of the beauty that we've always seen is that the dichotomy of history is you got two groups. One group want to keep the same bullshit going, and then the other group want to change the bullshit. And I must say, I admire you both for being on the side that wanted to change the bullshit, and that's quite awesome. And what closing words? Words of encouragement, words of wisdom going forward.
All I can say is go see the exhibit at the Gay and Lesbian Historical Society on the queer people who were involved in the Summer of Love. And for those of you who are queer, continue to seek out who you are, why you're here, and what you're supposed to do, and organize with other people.
Can you mention about Jose Sardi? I think that he was a big figure.
The what?
Jose Sardi, I think he was a big figure.
Well,
Quite often.
I didn't know. I mean, I met him at one or two events, but
And he wasn't just an inspiration kind of guy. He was, put on your work boots, get down, scrub the place in, and let's get something going here. He was extremely realistic. He didn't have dreams. I mean, they've had it, but his focus was on what needs to be today to protect the world from being totally gone to hell by tomorrow. Part of
He's a pioneer.
incredible.
Gentlemen, it's been quite.
oh wait, do you have the parting
words?
words?
Yeah,
You didn't get a chance for your parting.
Oh, that's okay. This guy,
Give us a word of wisdom.
I had one actually, my old brain didn't keep it. Clearly, in the discussions. I think that the advantage that old people have over young people is that we can look at what we had hoped would happen and see what actually happened. You learn the distinction between dreaming and achieving. And you don't want to cut down on the dream. That's more important than anything else. But learning to see what constitutes possibility, what kind of future is really worth fighting for, and which is just masturbation. I think I learned that from Harvey Milk, because he was so aware of how, in his mind, how homophobia was just a plague that was taking over the world. And it was so urgent to him, that he had to do stuff that would work. You couldn't do stuff that made you feel good. You do stuff that works. And, he lost most of his battles, as I have, and as you do. If you're really on the edge, you're going to lose most of your battles. But if you leave something behind that's lasting and accountable to history, you're a very important person, like Harvey was. And I think we have here in this city, not just in the queer world, but in the population at large, we have one of the most extraordinary collections of talent and vision and possibility of any community in the world. And it's great to be here. And I keep trying to get my friends from back in Texas to come out here and to believe in the future and to see things that have happened that weren't supposed to happen and make some new ones happen. So I'm just a romantic, idealist, visionary. But I think I'm that because I've seen some things that are possible, that nobody thought was possible, that happened.
Well, gentlemen, it's been quite an hour-long discussion. Thank you for coming. It was quite awesome. And I should close it and go, wow. Thank you both for your contributions to humanity, and for your humanity, and for your humor, and hope for more of your contributions. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, we still have a little time.
I have a question, burning question. Thank you both again, and this has been so great. It's one of the best Saturdays I've had in a long time. My burning question is about, it's been nearly 50 years, or over 50 years or so, since the last time we've had such a courageous political voice like Harvey Milk, with regards to LGBT rights in our movement. And I find it, I don't know if it's odd or if you could speak to maybe some of the reasons why we haven't been able to have another courageous voice that speaks to the core values of LGBTQ rights. We have gay politicians in today's time, but we've really deviated from some of those core values that you talked about, like socialist thoughts and ideas or economic equity, and who continuously are contributing to an establishment party that doesn't necessarily speaks to LGBTQ rights. How do you get to a place where creating a space or an opportunity for LGBTQ politicians who are really going to speak to the empowerment of our communities?
Harvey Milk's worst enemies were the lesbian and gay politicians. Because he arrived at a moment in history when it was possible to be a lesbian or a gay politician. And so the ones who were waiting for an easy thing, for it to be easy, the ones that were doing it back when it was hard and impossible got wiped out. And then it got easier because of their sacrifice for a new bunch to come along and take advantage. Harvey, I had to often pull his coattails and say, hush, because of his anger at, let's be topless or some gay paper. He was taking advantage of the radical left's achievements and turning it all into powder, to superficiality, the gay pride and stuff. So if you have a political vision that's on the left, your job is to figure out how much of that is just masturbation and how much of it is is possibility. And that requires intelligence. Not one person's intelligence, but a group of people who've been through a battle together and learned something from that. That's where the movement comes in. And unless you've had that experience of being, I'm glad I was a liberal for all those years. It was a horrible thing to do. And it would have been terrible to die and go straight to hell during that. But I learned that it's bullshit. I learned that always assuming the best thing that happens if we will behave ourselves is death. Make them behave themselves. That's what has happened. And that's what Harvey was all about. And it's a very simple thing in the radical theory. And a number of other people who just said, we're not going to play your games, we're going to play our games, and you're going to lose. So be as radical as you can be as smart as you can be as loving as you can be, and take care of each other. And you got to be.
I also think that we need to stop looking at politicians. I mean, in a way, Harvey wasn't a politician. He sort of came out of the theater world and other stuff like that. He lost election after election after election. I mean, I think what you're talking about, having that kind of vision and stuff, is probably more likely going to come from a gay musician or a queer musician or a writer or something. And, San Francisco, we're such a weird place. We turn our politicians into our rock stars. It's weird to me.
Always a rock star.
Well, I mean, well, he was. I like it. But I think that visionary leadership does not necessarily come from political leaders, because their whole interest is in getting elected, not in inspiring in a really moving way. So I'd say instead of looking to the politicians for that, look to the songwriters or the poets or the artists, the visual artists who are speaking them.
But again, how much of that has to do with politicians that want to be comfortable with that paycheck?
Yeah. And it's, also when Harvey was doing it, it was not easy. Like he said, he got. Now, I don't think he didn't get elected those first 3 or so times because he was gay. I think he didn't get elected because of everything else he was saying. So it's really, in a way, we've moved, at least in San Francisco, into a place where being gay isn't enough. Or being a woman isn't enough. Or being black isn't enough to get elected. You've got to be saying something that is real. You can't just ride on your gender, your ethnicity. I'm hoping.
Anyone else?
Hello, Brett and Joey. You heard my little speech and question at the Harvey Milk meeting. Last year, this conference was celebrating Compton's cafeteria. And the thing is that the gay community was a conglomerate of people who were not fitting into the binary, the straight community. And so we would have both not merely gay men, lesbians, but they were bisexual and transgender. So we celebrate 50th year. Whenever I hear Stonewall, I want to make sure everyone knows that Stonewall will have their celebration in 2 years. So it's equal on both sides. And it's the whole spectrum, not just one segment. Unfortunately, we've done splintering and then coming back together, then splintering, coming back together. It's difficult. So you have any, in terms of politics or any other forms of socialization that will bring more our communities together as one community.
That's not gonna happen.
Well, I mean, no, I've always thought, I have to admit, I hate the fucking term queer. I was queer before it was a theory. I believe that this question of splintering or non-splintering, what are the similarities between a lesbian and a gay man or a transgender person? We're phenomenally different. And I think we need to celebrate those differences and not try to paper them over and pretend we're all just queer. I think we need to be fully lesbian, fully gay, fully transgender, and be there and accept each other, but not turn each other into me. I don't want to turn everybody, or I don't want to be turned into, this big mass melting pot thing. So I think it's the concept of unity through diversity. And if you have real diversity, that means you have respect for that other person's difference, even if you don't agree with them. You at least have enough, respect that you can work with them on the issues that you do hold in common. And the LGBTQ community is the major kind of crucible for figuring out how do we negotiate that. We're, LGBTQI, and now I've heard A, which I thought meant ally, but apparently means asexual. It's like all of these very different groups of essentially different beings as a group. How do we work together? And that fascinates me. I love that. I love trying to figure that out. But to me, it's not really the queer thing. I don't think is done. It's eradicated our differences and it's turned us into some sort of easier to market to demographic.
I like queer because its predecessor was all of these perfume words, and I like the offensiveness of the word queer, and I don't think we're beyond the point of having to stand up and say, I'm weird, I'm crazy, I'm not, I'm all the things that you work hard not to be. Because what we're about is challenging society's understanding of how things ought to be. And the word queer doesn't fit nicely into the list of nice things. So I like queer. I've never felt very queer. I wish I did. I feel very vanilla. But I like preserving the sense of alienation, the sense of anger, the sense of not striving to fit in, but striving to transform that I hear when I hear queer. And I'm sure most people don't hear that. And that's tough. I understand that they hear the wrong thing. But I want to make them hear the right thing. I want queer to become, Smithsonian Hall of queer stuff.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, never a dull moment. Thank you once again to Joey and Harry for this time, and it was an awesome panel, and we learned a lot. And as we say, we're just getting started. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, we're going to take a break in a minute. There are plenty of snacks in the back room where Kathy Looper's office is. And so I'm going to invite you to have some cookies and fruit and juice and water. But first, I'd like to introduce Lito Sandoval. This year our conference is dedicated to those who died in Orlando, Florida, almost 1 year ago on June 12th, 2016. And so I would like Lito to say a few words about these people and to honor the fact that even when we're out in the world doing ordinary things, we can be threatened with homophobia. So Lito, thank you so much.
Okay, so I wrote a little something. I think a lot of memorials have just been sort of a reading of names, and I sort of focused on what a lot of us went through actually on the morning of that we woke up. So it was Pride Month. They wanted to dance, to laugh, to cruise, to commune. They wanted to live life freely and openly in their sanctuary. Queer clubs have always been our refuge, the spaces we could hold hands and kiss without retribution. Latin night, our temple, where we could feel whole, celebrate our totalidad. But that was taken from them. They were taken from us. They are not just 49 names to be read through tears, but 49 lives torn from our hearts. When my community is attacked and my heart damaged, I gear up for a fight. As I readied my battle gear, I noticed the reaction of my friends, fellow Joteria. Shock, sadness, fear, tears and more tears. It was then I knew I had to be more than just a fighter. I had to be an elder. It was on me to teach them how to show our resilience, how we carry with us the love for each other, the love of our families, how we must fight, live, and love for generations past, generations gone, and generations to come. How we must band together, especially after acts meant to tear us apart and break us down. How we must carry within us the names of those who have passed and honor their legacies by loving freely, living freely, being free. The massacre at Pulse nightclub has left its scars, etched itself into our collective memories. And while we continue with our lives, we will never forget those individuals we lost. Pulse nightclub itself may be gone, pero el pulso del amor continúa. Thank you.
The fact that we can't just go to meetings and rallies all the time. We have to be able to sing and dance and laugh. And I think you'll agree that if that isn't part of if that isn't part of the movement, then who wants to be in that movement, right? Michelle, I have known for a long time on the radio and TV waves. When I started watching the Pride Parade on TV, there was Michelle with Donna Sanchez. She is now the president of San Francisco Pride Parade. Let me welcome Donna Sanchez. All right.
We're all situated. Welcome everyone and thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Before I introduce our next wonderful panelists, I really do want to thank every single one of you from the bottom of my heart, and Sue for having me. It's so important, in my opinion, to have intergenerational contact, and especially in the LGBTQ community, because of all of you and your lived experiences and your will to be courageous in the 70s, the 80s, to be yourself, to be authentic, even if it was sharing a drink or having a same-gender relationship or to be outside the norm. That has all contributed to my privilege of being able to come out in year 2000 and enjoy something as festive as San Francisco Pride, but in a way where it wasn't a space for protesting or fighting back. And so I thank you all for that. And I also think these conferences need to happen more often, in these conversations and meeting our senior community to have dialogue and preserving your legend, our history, and ensuring that our community is well taken care of. So, as Jesse had mentioned in the previous part of our conference, you know, like the real leaders, if you will, who we're looking for inspiration is more than likely going to come from the artists in our community, the poets, the songwriters, the comedians. Even if you look at what's happening today politically, I think Alec Baldwin will have a job for the next 4 years just, by doing comedy. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our panelists. And by the way, I want to do it a little differently than our last session. In the Q&A portion, I'll toss out the first question, but we'll go around and feel free to also interject and have your own questions, and I'll point to you as you raise your hand. I believe that the second half of our conversation will have performances, which I'm excited about. So Let's introduce Karen Ripley. Karen came to the gay comedy scene in 1977 in San Francisco, and I guess there were only 5 of you at the time.
Give or take.
Karen has graced the cover of the East Bay Express with Whoopi Goldberg, and also Miss Magazine's Top 100 Lesbian Comment in 2009. Also has been awarded a 2005 San Francisco Fringe's Best Musical Comedy with Annie Larson in the original play Show Me Where It Hurts, and also 2006 Diva Fest with Waiting for FEMA. Karen has traveled all over the USA and the Caribbean and has been featured in Logo's Wisecracks Episode 2. Karen has taught at the LGBT Center in San Francisco and did so for about 10 years. And Karen wrote and performed her one-woman show at the Marsh in Berkeley called Oh No, There's Men on This Land. Theater Eddie called it one of the top 5 for 2015. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
Our second panelist, also doesn't need much introduction, but I'll go ahead and make it right. Blackberry is a song stylist, songmaker, poet, writer, photographer, health educator, and community advocate. In other words, I love this, he's an artivist. Was born in 1945 in Buffalo, New York. Blackberry grew up in Baltimore. He performed music and appeared in several films, including Marlon Riggs's Tongues Untied, Non Je ne regrette rien. I hope I said that right.
No regrets.
No regrets. Yeah.
It's also has an English stuff.
Anthem, Affirmations, and Black Ink. Isaac Julian's is Looking for Langston, and Nancy and Peter Adair's Word is Out. Blackberry's first album, Blackberry and Friends, finally, in 1981, featured the classic award-winning song, Eat the Rich.
Woo.
He also recorded the soundtrack for the Haight-Ashbury Radio Collective's History of San Francisco, Knowing at the Gateway of Gold. He is a, I'm sorry? Knocking. Typo, I'm sorry.
No problem. I'm here, keep going.
Thank you. This pioneer has also appeared on the first anthology of men's music, Walder Roses, Songs of Changing Men, which is now in the Smithsonian Folkways collection, and Gay Men's Music, Strong Love Song of Gay Liberation, 1972 to 1981 CD. Blackberry is one of the most visible Black queer same-gender loving artists in the country. He currently lives in Oakland and was recently awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from Generations. And I should also say he is this year's recipient of the Audrey Joseph Entertainment Award for San Francisco Pride. So welcome, Blackberry. So I'll start with the first question. And like I said, feel free to jump in and just raise your hand and I'll point to you. And my first question is for both of you. I'll start with Karen. Identifying as an LGBTQ artist at the time of the gay liberation movement, was that liberating or was it political? And the answer can be both. Karen.
I was destined for comedy since the age of 6. I wanted to do comedy, and I used to, on the Sunday paper, there was a newspaper called The Parade, and on the first page it was my favorite jokes, and I used to cut them out, and I saved them in a suitcase until I was about 18. I had thousands of jokes, and I would memorize and go to school and tell jokes. That's all I wanted to do. I got into art through music. I got sober after spending a little time in the gutter, a lot of time. And it became clear to me that now that I'm sober, I have to, this is my, I don't know, it felt like destiny. So I wrote some jokes. I went to a little place in the East Bay called the Bacchanal.
No.
You remember, yeah, 1977. There was a little buzz going around. I got a call from Tom Amiano. Come to Valencia Road. But before that was a place called Fanny's. Worked with Sharon McKnight and Carol Roberts. She was a bisexual way back when, if I'm jarring any memories. So, It was liberating, yes, and, what am I trying to say? At the same time, Harvey Milk was telling everyone, come out, come out, come out. And there was an enormous amount of pride in my circle. And so from the minute I stepped on stage, it was about gay jokes, about our community and the humor in our community and the humor in ourselves, and stop taking everything so seriously, because the women's movement in the 70s was very intense, which I guess it had to be at the time. And I was trying to lighten things up, and I was making fun of us, which was, I felt needed. So, it was liberating, yes, and it was political. I could have stayed in the closet like many gay comedians. I chose, that wasn't my purpose. No, I'm here to entertain the gay community, and that was all I really thought about. So.
Library. Same question for you. If identifying as an LGBTQ artist in the 70s was liberating or political, and the answer can be both.
Well, I'm going to say I came out in the 50s, and my mom caught me. So she was the only one I really didn't want to know, and that's what she knew. That was very liberating. So I was out. I had a period of time, maybe in the 60s when I was in the service. I couldn't be as blatant. But somebody found out. When I came here in the early 70s, I came in 74. I was already out. I was an out musician. I was singing in Tucson in a band, in a rock band, and me and the bass player were songwriters. So I did out songs in my band, and all my band members were straight. So I was doing queer music when I came to here. That's what got me. So I was in the coffee houses, playing queer music, and people found me. The art became, the music became my passion because it was a way that I could put my politics and my music together. Somebody told me that I either had to do politics or I had to do music. I couldn't do both. And I wanted to prove them wrong, and I had. So I've always pushed the envelope. People used to say I was outrageous, because I used language, I talked about sexual things, I was very open and out about it. I talked about it in my gigs, we went to schools and speakers group. So I was always comfortable, never uncomfortable. And I push. That's what I did.
Opening up. I can keep asking questions until you feel comfortable too. I'm good with that. Art as a way to unite communities. And the question is for both of you to talk about, your audience over time. If you felt that that's what was happening, if maybe, Karen, if laughing about ourselves was a healing factor and brought out people because we needed that, and to talk about, the experiences of bringing different communities into your work.
It's not uncommon for a gay comic to go on stage and go, "Hello, dykes," and all the stuff. "Hello, fags." "Hello, straight people." So there's that kind of acknowledging right off the get who's in our audience. There's a variety of places you play, and so like if you're doing a pride event, the energy is almost a given already, and they are so welcoming. And yes, tell us jokes about ourselves. "Oh, I dropped my dildo and the dog ran off with it," and the audience understands. A straight audience might go, "Is that honey? Is that funny?" So certain gay audiences immediately, I mean, they're with you, and it's an absolute joy. I do find gay men laugh twice as hard as lesbians, especially in a bar when they're half drunk. It is a joyous occasion to hear that kind of laughter coming out. Lesbians have loosened up a lot as we went through changes and acceptance. There was a time where we were pretty boxed in. One part of me hates that my sexuality is a political issue, but it is, and so I guess my whole comedy career has been pretty much political, because I love to tell, quote unquote, dirty jokes, sexual jokes. I do political jokes too, but I think I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
And of course, there was a shock factor that I liked when I would go on stage and talk about lesbian or vagina or, buttholes, and people would laugh because they of course related, because that's a lot of what we do sexually in our bodies and anyway. So in a way, it's like, if we didn't have to talk about sex, can we just be one? Who could we be? But we don't. Everything we do has something to do with who you're sleeping with or not sleeping with. So it does build community, absolutely, absolutely. And for a while, Josie's had more straight people coming than gay people, because we had new, fresh, and very funny material that they weren't getting across the board at the punchline. And it was like, oh, these gay people are so funny. And it's true in many ways. And I don't know if it's because you take a man, let's say he becomes more queeny, if it's a lowering of status, and people go, oh, that's funny. Now when a dyke decides she's going to be more masculine and raising her status, people are a little, like Leah Delaria put up with that a lot. But part of Delaria's delivery was, fuck you, motherfucker, I'm gonna fuck your wife. And I'd be like, you're gonna get your ass kicked. She didn't care. And I got testosterone coming out my ears. Whereas the queens, people just love the more. And who are the original comedians, in my opinion? The drag queens. Before there was any gay comedy, as far as, Kate Clinton and Margaret and all this, the queens were out there being funnier than funny. So, I credit them with a lot of the history in it, and it should be in the records that the queens were often the original comedians. So that's all my spiel.
Blackberry, how might have your art, your work, your music, how might have it united communities in terms of your audience or people who consume your art?
Well, being a man of color, I was about coalition work. And I performed for every community. I performed for Asians, I performed for Native Americans, Latinos, African Americans, white folks. I've been in all those communities. And I always, I did good. Because people appreciated the honesty. And that was one of the things I had decided early on, in the late 60s, actually. I decided, I was just gonna be open and just, if I made a friend, good. If I didn't, it wasn't somebody that I needed anyway. And it worked. It worked good. I've toured. I've been to Central America and to Europe and Scandinavia, and a lot of my audiences there were straight. Actually did a concert in Denmark in this club. People brought their children, families came. So, for me, I've always felt like I bridged those two things.
I would say so too, by the honor and recognition of your work, which has been amazing. I'm going to move on to my next question and kind of yeah, sure.
Karen, what advice would you give to someone who is wanting to start entertaining?
If it's comedy, yeah, like if it's a stand-up, for example. Well, you gotta write a joke. It starts with writing jokes and doing it for friends. You gotta come from your heart. The more personal, the more universal. You hear me? The absolute one. If I tell my truth and the way it is for me, it comes out pretty real, and people identify with real. I could go on stage and go, yeah, I got 6 kids and my old man's at home, and people know I'm lying. Audiences are not stupid. They're not stupid. I used to tell a joke where I'd say, I thought, well, I bet I'd make more money if I went back in the closet. So I got a dress and a push-up bra and high heels, and I went on stage in Kansas, and somebody said, hey, who's the dyke in the dress? If you're not yourself. Yeah. I guess it worked for some comedians who stayed in the closet and they crossed over somewhat and made 6 figures a year and so on. But if it makes you laugh, then that's what you want to do. Because you want to have a good time up there. And if you're having a good time, most of the audience will have a good time with you. And then go to these open mics and get to know all the other comedians. I found the gay community to be very supportive back in the day when we started. The straight circles, it was a little more cutthroat. But in our community, they was going, hey, you want to open for me? Or you want to do 5 minutes? I mean, we were desperate for ourselves. So there was just a fair amount of support compared to the ugliness of other parts of comedy. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just want to say why I laughed so loud when Karen talked about a dog running with the children. I had this photograph, but since I don't have the photograph, I have to explain. Like, when I first moved my kids in the 70s to San Francisco, they found this big giant dildo, and they brought it home and said, hey, look, Mom, we found, what should we do with it? And I said, well, first, let's wash it, and then wash your hands, and look, it stands up by itself. So we'll just put it on the coffee table. So it was on our coffee table. And I had this big yellow dog who loved Blackberry. And Blackberry came over, knock, his name was Joe. Knock, knock, knock at the door. Who is it? It's Blackberry. Oh, come on in. Joe got up. Oh, it's Blackberry. I love him. Blackberry walked in, saw the big pink dildo, picked it up, put it in front of him, and said, what the hell is this? And in the meantime, my dog came up, and that's the picture that I had. This big yellow dog with his mouth on this giant pink dildo in front of this big black man. And I just had to share that with you guys to explain why I laughed so loud. Because he didn't run away with the dildo, but it was funny anyway.
Thanks for sharing that.
Let me stop it.
That's why it was extra funny.
I heard a story recently of this gal that bought one of these great big double dongs. I mean, the big, it's like a joke. And some people at work were like going, what the fuck are you gonna do with this? So they used it and they were playing baseball in the warehouse. Anyway, using it as, okay,
That's a new one. I haven't tried that.
Yeah.
But maybe soon. Maybe soon. I'll toss out a question relevant to today's current, time and political weirdness and sadness and all of it, right? It seems that there are a lot of people. Everyone is affected by 45 in his administration, it appears, unless you're a billionaire, white, and I just wondered if that has also inspired you to create new material, or at least incite emotions or elicit emotions that you will continue with your work to address what's happening politically. So I'll start with Blackberry and come back to Karen.
Yes. Well, I always do a mixture of political and personal. And the personal is political. And the political is personal. So, Peter Rich has gotten richer. His menu has expanded. I have a song called Old People that I'm writing new verses with it. But Old People was supposedly, you make up a verse and then everybody sings a chorus. Of course, there's always going to be old people. Anyone can make a verse. I always wrote those songs that you could sing at churches. All the time. Right. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm also, lately I've been writing a lot of funny songs because there's so much tension and we're so uptight and worried and scared and I'm breaking the tension. My I write. I'm a hook person. Hooks are the things that people remember. Three big funny songs that are personal. One is called "You're Coming Still on the Pages of My Mind." One's called "In the Back of the Bus." It's about having sex in the back of a Greyhound.
I like that.
And the other is I Got Crabs from the Holiday Inn. So those are kind of songs. At least the hooks they remember. They don't remember the song they remember.
I'll definitely remember the crabs from the Holiday Inn. Karen?
I was an absolute mess when 45 showed up. I have, of course, since calmed down. When I look at our history, it has often been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I remain extremely positive when I look at the progress from when I was a baby dyke until now. I have an enormous amount of pride in this generation of gay people. I mean, I cannot believe. I didn't think the Berlin Wall would come down, much less gay marriage. When I want to hear about Trump, I can turn on Rachel Maddow, a dyke. I can turn on Don Lemon, fag, I can turn on Anderson Cooper. Wait a minute, where'd all these queers get on TV doing the news? Major channels. Wow, I can, oh, I don't know. I don't let him, I don't mean to be complacent, but I don't let him bug me too much, except with Korea. We, as a people, we are so saturated. We are so saturated in television, film, music, politics. It's not going to stop whether 45 is there for, oh, God help me, 8 years or not. It's not going to stop. The one thing that I am doing, because I've been pulling away from comedy and getting more into theater, I am working on a show about the resistance in Denmark and the way they were so incredible saving, rescuing, and getting Jews out of Copenhagen during World War II. And I spent time thinking, their resistance was so profound, some of the Germans just went, fuck it. Where did that resistance come from? What did those people have that they were willing to organize that much? I think about these guys in Chechnya, these gay men, and I'm thinking, oh my God, there's gotta be people in Chechnya who can create a safe house, who can hide men in their basements, who can do the same thing they did in Denmark. But who knows anybody in Chechnya? How do you find out the news? There are decent human beings everywhere, so I don't mean to be light of 45, but I just don't take his ass that seriously, and it sounds funny, he's just the president. He's just the president. He's got to go through a whole wall of shit to, well, anyway, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is what I'm saying. Thanks.
Feel free to.
For me, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's 2 steps forward and 5 steps back.
Uh-oh.
Because they took the voting rights away, and it took us years to get
Yeah.
that. So, you know, I walk in 2 worlds, or I walk in one world that's kind of pushed part of itself outside of itself. And those are my reality. My realities are a little different than a lot of people. And I wouldn't even say a little different. I'd say a lot different.
Touching on that, and again, if you want to jump in on the conversation and ask something, just raise your hand. But in today's time, it feels like there's just a lot of policing of speech, or how we say something, or how we express something, especially when it comes to social media, which has become a tool, right, to share your art. I'd love to hear from both of you. To start with BlackBerry, talking about those difficulties, how that's impacted your art, and where you find inspiration to rise above it, still by producing art and music and continuing on with your work.
Karen did something today, my label. She spelled my name wrong, but she corrected it, and it looks really artsy, which you do a lot through the line, and I thought, oh, this is really artistic. I didn't forget a new label, I used the one that I have. And part of that came from the Cubans. I've traveled to Cuba 17 times.
Wow.
Since 1995, and we'll be there again around the end of the year. I performed in Cuba. Cuban people know me, well, not everyone, but there are places I can go where people recognize me in Cuba. It's very different once you get outside of the United States, how people respond to you or talk to you or be with you. But getting back to the off track, I take lemons and I make lemonade. That's basically what I do. I'm not afraid to speak up. So I do. If I feel that I'm being pushed, I'll tell you that I'm being pushed. A lot of people don't want to hear it, but I'll say it. I don't like being in situations that I don't like being in, and I'll let you know that I'm not enjoying the situation. It's just the way I've been always. So nothing's going to stop me from making music. You know, if I have to go to the streets and do it, which is how I started out. Actually, it was on the streets.
I guess I was referring to, I mean, even for something like Facebook and to express yourself artistically or authentically.
I don't express myself too much on Facebook.
Yeah. Or
because they take your stuff.
Right.
It's theirs once it's on, so I don't want to give them anything of mine.
Matt, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to actually share the Facebook conversation, especially like artistically and having an artistic way of sharing things of that nature. I don't engage with technology very much. Like I just recently haven't like brought my phone back into my life, but other than that, like if I do go to Facebook, it's like maximum of like an hour a day or something of that nature. But I found it really, really empowering for me. I present myself, I'm like, hey, this is me. Like, if I walk down the street, I'm going to talk to you the same way on this platform as I would walking down the street. Same person. Like, I don't care what you think about me. I don't care if you don't like me. Don't have me as a friend in the first place. I have 231 friends, and every single one of them I've met in person. I can tell you where I met them, how I met them, and every single conversation. So, a lot of times when people say, oh, Facebook and social platforms, and I'm like, it's a tool. You can also set the guidelines for yourself as to how you want to show yourself. If you're going to be fully transparent, you shouldn't have a problem. Like, show yourself, be yourself, and do it.
Karen, do you want to add to that discussion?
It's true that if you put material out there, the world can take it. I've heard my jokes on TV and other places. I say I will not be censored. I say what I want to say. You do not see me on TV much, did you? Unless you get a deal with like Logo or a HBO special where you can use whatever language you want. Some people think foul language is just lazy. Come up with something a little more creative. I started off using it more as a shock value, and I like dirty words. I'm sorry.
I do. I love them too.
As far as social media, I have a few clips that were put out there. And part of that is my goal was never to become rich and famous. I mean, I guess it would have been fun, but I had no idea how to get to where Ellen is. I was caught up in an AIDS epidemic. I came out as a gay comedian, and I got a call every week, will you do a fundraiser? And all the comedians we rallied around. And at the time, we didn't like gay men that much. But it changed pretty damn quickly, and we all rallied, and I did countless. And I felt like this was my gift, and this was my contribution, and I'm sticking to it, you know. and the rest has been gravy, I guess, because of that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah,
Sorta,
I think so.
I don't-
I'm just curious and kind of
Yeah.
looking through, you've been part of the movement from the liberation movement to what
Yeah.
people are pointing now is the resistance movement. So I have one more question. I know that we will have some performances. Are you both performing?
I didn't realize we were performing, but.
You could, I just said, you can use your time however you like.
Okay.
Performance
Maybe I'll
is,
think of
is
something
fine.
funny.
Yes.
Dr. you are performing?
I can do that.
Okay. So I know that's the good stuff. Does anybody have any burning questions before I ask the last question?
Over here.
Jasmine?
Hi, welcome Karen,
Thank
and
you.
welcome back John Karen. Last year's conference was on Compton's 50th anniversary. Stonewall has to wait to 2 more years for their celebration. My question for both of you, especially in the arts, have you come across not just gay and lesbian, but also bisexual, transgender, queer, and other designations in your travels, and how they have helped you or not helped you in your craft? I am a singer and a musician, so I appreciate many art forms. I do readings, and thank you.
I'm just going to go this off right quick. About 3 years ago, I co-founded the Oakland Queer Trans Open Mic. And I hosted I co-host with other people on every Tuesday for the past 3 years. And it's an incredible turnout of all kinds of folks. Let's say probably half of our people show up for a trans. And half of our people show up for people of color. So.
It is an absolute fabulous event, I must say. Everyone is welcome to say whatever they want to say. I never felt so much love. I've gone there a few times. In my experience, when I wrote a play called Oh No, There's Men on the Land, and it had nothing to do with men, really. I mean, it had a lot to do with men, because I talked about a lot of men, but I think the younger crowd thought I was talking about keeping men off of Michigan, the women's music place we had. And it really wasn't about that. I was making fun in a way. Basically, you had a field. You had 7,000 women in a field half naked, celebrating and teaching each other how great it is to be a woman. Since all the way from back in the beginning of time, we've been kind of second class, you know. But when the garbage men came, or the guys that came to pump out what they called the porta-janes, the trucks would roll in and you'd hear, men on the land, men on the land, and women that wanted to cover their tits or their hoo-ha, you know, that felt like I wanted to throw a shirt on, they would do that. Most of them would give it a rat's ass. But I did a gig recently called No Man's Land. Ash Fisher is a local comic, and she starts off as a lesbian. She falls in love with a man, but she still produces comedy. Originally, they produced a show, her and Irene too, called Man Haters. Why, I don't know, but the place is packed. With men and women of all sexuals. So then I go and I perform at No Man's Land. The women on the stage, it's all women, they are gay, straight, bi, whatever, transgender, whatever. And that was the goal. So, what I'm realizing, I have to step out of the way. Sexuality today is just as flowing and colorful and every color it was before, but it wasn't, as pronounced. I'm a dyke and I'll always be a dyke and dyke. So that night we're performing and Ash goes on stage and she's talking about this guy she fell in love with. And some dykes in the audience are going, oh, we don't want to hear about him. She says, wait, I'm the producer and I'll talk about whatever I want. Then a bisexual woman comes on stage and she tells some jokes and a gal in the audience got up and walked out and says, I thought this was going to be women's comedy. And there's an assumption that she made. And it became very clear to me that my generation, some of us were stuck in the mud, or, you know what I mean? And the men too, you guys get stuck. We have to let these young people move on and do whatever they're gonna do because it seems like it's more open. I don't care what's between your legs, I love you. Is that profound or what? I find that totally profound. If I can love someone's heart and they love my heart, we can figure something else between our legs. We got a whole store full of shit. You know what I'm saying. But so I'm trying to adopt that openness to let this young generation go out and do whatever fluid thing they want to do, and God bless them. So, did I answer your question?
It was Jasmine's, but
Yes.
it does dovetail.
So yes. Sorry, Dan.
Does dovetail into my last question, and that is, kind of the what next. So both of you talked about, we've seen our community move 2 steps. Blackberry mentioning that it's going 2 steps forward and then also 5 steps back. So we'll stick with that. I think that's accurate. Some of us in the community, we did not live to see those, 5 steps go back, are experiencing it for the first time. So this whole resistance movement, it felt like our honeymoon cut short. We're on the heels of marriage equality.
Yes.
We're on track to more rights. Everything's going to be okay. And so my question to you is really just kind of what would you say to the artists who are producing and creating at this time, who identify as LGBTQ, and to those who are LGBTQ and who have made it that big, like someone like a Sam Smith or a Kate McKinnon, but aren't necessarily producing material that's LGBTQ identified. So you can throw some thoughts around just artistry or being an artivist, as Blackberry has coined the term. Sorry.
I was going to add, in my community, in the African American community, people who are older are called elders. And I'm in an eldership mentor. I'd say right now I'm doing a lot of mentoring. Like I tell some, I'm too stiff to run from the police. So they come after the dark targets. That's what they like. But I've been really fortunate to have younger men of color coming to my home, spending time with me, picking my brain, asking me lots of really poignant and really good questions. And they're listening. So my role right now is as a mentor. Days of being out on the street, well, I would go if I could take my bicycle. Then I could get away. But if I tried to run, my knees are so messed up. I'm not ready to get beat down. Those are the early days. I did that early in the early days of San Francisco. Got police twisting and tearing my body apart. Somebody can't take those drugs. So I'm a mentor. No.
Would you repeat the question?
Sure, just talking about the fact that historically speaking, you have witnessed our movement going forward, going backwards,
Yes.
and what are
Yes.
some things that you can say for the young generation and those who hadn't experienced that
Yeah.
within the artist community?
What is your goal? Whose purposes do you want to serve? If you have an artistic soul, that you have an artistic soul. Whether you play music for yourself or you want to share it, you just keep doing it. If it brings you satisfaction, if you just keep doing it. I have done a comedy for something like 30-something years, and I'm not rich and famous. I'm a local. I traveled a little. I'm not internationally known. I was.
But I'm not rich.
Yeah, me too. I kind of was Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, Berkeley. You know, that's my world. That's where I served. I would show up. I'd tell jokes. Maybe they'd make some money at the door. That was that. A little TV time, a little travel outside the country. Again, what's your goal? Whose purpose do you want to serve? The greater community? Do you want to serve the planet? I mean, we have this other culture too, where you have the L word, queers, folk, orange is the new black. You have all these gays in LA. And again, what is their purpose? What is their job? Do they need, they're out, they're on TV. I think Phil Donahue and Oprah Winfrey back in the day for bringing lesbian moms on TV, and these audiences are going, a lesbian mom? These people in Bumfuck, Oklahoma are like, you're kidding me, on TV. They couldn't believe it. So it's like doors kept getting pushed open, and I mean, we are everywhere. As far as 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, we still have to keep the struggle. We still have to keep the struggle. But never forget how far we have come. It was illegal for a woman to wear boxer shorts. You could get arrested. In San Francisco, if I was wearing a pair of boxers, because I was feeling butch, you could go to jail. You can go to prison in Cuba. Not anymore, but for a while. So, I have to remain positive. I just have to remain positive. And that's part of the reason I think I'm in this thing about the Danish and the incredible resistance they came up with. And where is that spirit? And how do we recreate that spirit? And we keep pushing. Oh, yeah. There's just, and all minorities. All the minorities are still getting beat up, they're still getting killed, we're still getting our rights denied. But in my lifetime, I can't help but look back and go, holy fuck, look how far we've come. So, I have to maintain that and keep doing the work. So I'm working on a play about resistance.
Resisting the dildo? On that note, we'll move on now to the performance piece of this, the second program of today's conference.
Oh.
Library,
I just wanted to tell a really short story.
Okay.
It's really cute. I guess it was my 3rd time I was in Atlanta doing a conference at the Unitarian Church. And these 6 kids came in, 4 guys and 2 girls, who I know were in the wrong place. And everybody else did too. They came in, they painted everything. And someone who was sitting near them heard all of their conversations where they they were shocked about what I was saying and I was talking about in my lyrics. But they didn't leave. They stayed the whole time. So, yeah. Yeah, well, they were. They didn't leave. That was the funny.
Thank you. So I believe Blackberry's going to perform a couple songs. What? It's cute.
Okay, I'm gonna do, without my guitar, I'm gonna do the lyrics to I Got Crabs, since you said you like that one.
Can we clap?
Sure.
Snap.
Snap would be better. This would be this. Let me tell you, I got crabs at the Holiday Inn. I got them sleeping alone, my friend. If sleeping is original sin, I got crabs from the Holiday Inn. Let me tell you, I got crabs from the Holiday Inn. I think I shared them with my friend named Ben, and he shared them with a brother named Ken. We shared crabs from the Holiday Inn. On the day that I discovered, I went home and told my love about the strange sad dilemma I'm in. He said, honey, don't you tell her, we'll weather this together. He took me in the bedroom with him, and then we shared crabs from the Holiday Inn. We shared them sister with each other, my friend. In the morning we used it, and we got rid of them. No more crabs from the Holiday Inn. Let me tell you how I got crabs. 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 Let me sing that. I got crabs at the Holiday Inn. Keep going, I got crabs. I want to sing something else. I got crabs. You know. I got crabs at the Holiday Inn. I got crabs at the Holiday Inn. At the Holiday Inn. At the Holiday Inn. At the Holiday Inn. We're going to do Holiday Inn good. At the Holiday Inn, I got crabs. Come on, I ain't stopped yet. I got crabs. I got one more part. I got crabs. Last part for free.
Please cut the part where I'm saying, I got crabs. I'll never get a girlfriend again.
Who's got the A200?
In the morning we use red.
I don't know what to
Red is
say.
much better than A200.
Oh,
That's a plug for Red should give me money for plugging their product. But it is a good message.
I get to travel some now that I'm funny, and I'll tell some of my old favorites, I guess. I went to Salt Lake City. There's gay people there, and I wore my gay pride t-shirt, and I was harassed by born-agains at the airport, so I killed them again. They'll be born again, of course. But I got on the plane, and there was an empty seat next to me, and I was so happy because I'm spread out. And of course, at the last minute, this woman runs down the aisle, so I get up, let her in, and all of a sudden, my genitals are like on fire, and I'm like, she is kind of cute, but what? Maybe this is my soulmate. I haven't had that kind of energy in a long time. But then I realized that the thermal patch I had on my low back and my crack there. I don't know. I don't do bars much anymore, but I used to go, and you've had this happen. You go into a bar and you see somebody and it's like boiling. The energy is there. You know. You can just tell, I'm going home with that person. And sure enough, you leave. And I got to her house. And, we're kissing and kind of caressing. And she says, oh, wait a minute, I have to find Binky. And I'm like, whatever. She comes back with this old brown stuffed bunny rabbit. That is like her thing. And she said, oh, you gotta kiss Binky. And I'm like, okay, this is weird, but okay. One. So I kiss the rabbit, being silly. So, it's kind of personal. So I tie her and blindfold her, and she said, oh, you have to tie and blindfold Binky. And I said, no. It's a stuffed rabbit. The eyes are made of buttons, it can't see. The legs are made of wool, where's it gonna go? I mean, she's crazy. And I thought, okay, I picked up a crazy one. I went to therapy, people, I spent a lot of money, and I bought a boundary. So, I thought, I'm gonna put my boundary down. It took Binky forever to come, and the rug burned her. Little ears went up for just a minute. Anyway. Yeah. No, seriously though. I did have a girlfriend for a while, and anyway, she was going to work. I had the day off, and she says, when I get home, you better be packing. And I says, fuck you, I don't own a suitcase. And she says, not that kind of packing. And I was like, oh. I was kind of old-fashioned. So I go to my sexual supply store, and I go in and I go, I need a ding-dong. And she says, that's next door. I go next door, and I kid you not, there's a Chinese restaurant called King Dong. And I go back in, and I said, no, I don't want Chinese food. A ding-dong, She says, over there, there's a table full of every kind of ding-dong you could ever imagine. Or, I mean a dolphin. Looks like a dolphin. A corn on the cob. We fucking are shucking. That. So anyway, so I see this cute little brown one, and I went, that's cute. I like that. She goes, try it on. I said, okay, this is all new to me. So I go, I try on, and I come out, and I go, I like it. I'm gonna wear it home. And no sooner did I get outside the store, and my ding dong fell up my pants on the ground, and these people in the Chinese restaurant stopped eating because I think they thought I had just dropped a big old turd. In the distance, it looks like a little brown turd. And I'm like, oh my God, I just spent a lot of money with this, and I'm not gonna walk away. So I had a plastic bag in my pocket. I picked it up, and just sort of like, I'm gonna walk to my car with my ding dong, and this man came up to me and he goes, where's your dog? And my dog. I said, oh, you go that way, I'll go this way. So I get home, I'm not kidding you, and I got this ding dong, and she gets home from work, I got candles, music, I'm packing, okay? So we're being warm and passionate, and all of the ding dong pops out of the harness. And it gets covered in cat hair. And all I want to say, people, it is not easy being a dyke. So have a little heart. Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you for being such a great moderator. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, please do.
You know, that song is it's a true song.
Uh-oh.
I really did get cast in the Holiday Inn. Seriously. I think well, somebody didn't change the sheets.
Okay, so no more one night stands at the Holiday Inn?
No, it wasn't even one night stand, I was by myself.
Oh,
I tell you.
He said by himself.
That's the worst.
And I had to tell my boyfriend when I got, because I went, it was at Audre Lorde, they did a celebration for Audre Lorde, I Am Your Sister.
Yes.
I went, I was like the only male performer for that thing. Also, I'm kind of like an honorary lesbian, so I get invited to a lot of women's events. And I'm usually the only man performer. But anyway, I went to this, and they put me up as a Holiday Inn, and that's where I got credit.
Didn't even get laid.
Didn't even get laid, and didn't have fun getting them. It was really a drag. And you know, my boyfriend was like, "Yeah, right." Well, yeah.
These are the benefits.
Yeah, they are. Oh, song that I've been trying to teach people at protests. Song's called "Oh People Don't Give Up." O-H, not old. We don't want old people to give up either. But the song is actually "Oh People." And people singing it say, "Oh, I thought you were singing old people." Old people don't give up, right? Like, yeah, I don't want old people to give up either, but I don't want anybody to give up. So it's old people don't give up. I know that things are tough. I know the going can get rough sometimes, but old people don't give up. Victory will be yours one day. The music, basically, you don't have to sing all those other parts, but if you can sing, "Oh, people, don't give up. I know that things are tough. I know the going can be rough sometimes. Oh, people, don't give up. 'Cause victory will be yours one day." Sing it with me, oh, people, don't give up. I know that things are tough. I know the going can be rough sometimes. Oh, people, don't give up. 'Cause victory will be yours one day. I'm gonna sing a verse. Well, I'm singing to the people of South Africa. My spirit joins you in struggle. It joins you in love. And as sure as the sun is shining high up above, victory will be yours one day. Sing it with me, oh people, don't give up. I know that things are tough, I know the going can be rough sometimes, but oh people, don't give up. 'Cause victory will be yours one day. Another verse. Well, I'm talking to the people of El Salvador. I know your living circumstance when you truly deplore. And human rights are what you're fighting for. Then victory will be yours one day. Sing it with me, oh people, don't give up. I know that things are tough, I know going can get rough sometimes. Oh people, don't give up. 'Cause victory will be yours one day. Another verse. I'm talking to the people who live in the States, especially the people in the U.S. today. We need more money for research. No, it can't be delayed. Victory will be yours one day. Sing it with me, oh people, don't give up. I know that things are tough, I know that going can get rough sometimes. Oh people, don't give up. The victory will be yours one day. Another verse. I'm talking to the people that all Black Lives Matter. Things will get much more worse, but things will get much more better. If you stand up and fight for all the blood that's splattered, then victory will be yours one day. Sing it with me, oh people, don't give up. I know that things are tough, I know the going can give up sometimes, but oh people, don't give up. The victory will be yours one day. One more time, oh people, don't give up. I know that things are tough, I know the going can give up sometimes, but oh people, don't give up. The victory will be yours one day. One more time. Oh, people, don't give up. I know that things are tough. I know that the going can give up sometimes. Oh, people, don't give up. Cause victory will be yours. Victory will be yours. Victory will be yours one day. Victory will be yours, victory will be yours, victory will be yours one day. And now victory will be yours, victory will be yours, victory will be yours one day.
Thank everyone for coming. I want to thank our wonderful panelists, Karen, Blackberry, and you continue to be an inspiration, and your contributions are legends to our community. So thank you so much, and thank you to Sue for putting it together.
Yes, thank you.
Sing it with me, oh people, don't give up. I know that things are tough, I know that going can't run from time, but oh people, don't give up, cause victory will be yours one day.